Thank you, Tahani. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. First, I want to thank the Moroccan Association for Human Rights, MDH, for organizing this very timely event. And I also want to thank my fellow participants, international participants, who are joining us in this panel. We're here today to demand the unconditional and immediate release of all prisoners of conscience in Morocco. Their continuing detention is in violation of both Moroccan law and international law. Their detention contradicts government claims about what it calls equity and reconciliation, and the claims that Morocco has entered a new era where human rights are protected. Government PR and propaganda campaigns cannot hide the truth. The case of the prisoners of conscience from Rif, who are serving a 20-year prison sentence for their participation in peaceful protests, is a stark reminder that some of the regime's old repressive habits have not changed, and in some aspect have gotten worse. The 2017 Hirak movement was a wave of peaceful popular protest that advocated for an end to the marginalization of the Rif region. As someone who was born and brought up in Rif, I know firsthand how our people have suffered since the massacres of 1958-1959. The death of Ahmed Zafzafi, who is a symbol of Rif peaceful resistance and whose son Nasser is serving 20 years prison sentence, is bringing back our collective memories of both repression and resistance. I can feel the pain that Nasser Zafzafi is feeling today. My father died when I was serving a 12-year prison sentence in Kenitra prison. I was not allowed to see him for the last time. My mother died when I was living in exile for 20 years. I hadn't seen her for 5 years. I grew up in Rif listening to my father's stories on how the massacres of 1958, 1959 unfolded and how many of his relatives were killed in Beni Rial. He witnessed these atrocities firsthand. Like my father, I was also a witness to the massacres carried out in January 1984 by the army in the Rif cities of Nador, El Hoceima, and Titwan. This happened just 7 weeks after my release from 8 years of detention, only to be arrested again the same night. King Hassan called all the people of Rif Awbash, thugs. I recount this to show that there's a background here that cannot be erased, and there are deep wounds that the cruelty and the ruthlessness directed at the Zafis have exacerbated. As we can see from the clips of the funeral of Ahmed Zafzafi, the disconnect between our people in Rif and the authorities is deeper than ever before. And yet, the policies of repressions have failed to subjugate our people in Rif. Let me turn to some facts so you can understand where we are today. As Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, Moroccan human rights groups, and international journalists have repeatedly explained, the Hirak movement was a totally peaceful movement that focused on social and economic demands. But this peaceful movement was met with a wave of arbitrary arrest and repression. More than 1,700 people were initially arrested. This was probably the highest number of people arrested ever in the successive waves of repression since independence. Many were criminally charged, and in June 2018, 54 peaceful Hirak activists were convicted on a variety of charges related to national security and handed very heavy prison terms of up to 20 years. Both national and international rights organizations have documented the torture that many endured and the serious due process violations that occurred during the trial proceedings. Their trial did not conform to international standard. Their trial was unfair. And in many cases, convictions were based on so-called confessions extracted through torture and under duress. Even a government that is most often a propaganda office that is called the National Council for Human Rights had at the time acknowledged the use of torture against the Iraqi detainees. Its internal report was never published, and the head of this office was fired. While some of those convicted have since been released, the leaders of the peaceful Iraq movement remain detained. Zafzafi is serving a 20-year prison sentence. Samir Ighi, 20 years. Nabil Ahamjir, 20 years. Zakaria Adharoush, 15 years. Muhammad Haki, 15 years. And Muhammad Jalloul, 10 years.
10 years.
From the MDH and the Moroccan Coalition of all human rights groups to Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and Freedom House, there is a well-established national and international consensus confirming that these youth have been imprisoned as retaliation simply for their peaceful activism in support of legitimate social and economic demands. As you are aware, the European Parliament had also called for their immediate and conditional release, as well as the release of the journalists who were detained at the time. But the last blow to the Moroccan government credibility came from the UN. In August 2024, the well-respected and impartial UN Working Group on Arbitrary Detention adopted an opinion finding that Nasser Zafzafi's detention is arbitrary and violate international law, and therefore called for his immediate release. The UN Working Group specifically found that Nasser Zafzafi, and I quote from the report, was arrested for his expressions and opinions rather than from any violent action on his part, that he is also detained for exercising his right to freedom of association, and that his detention is also linked to his participation in demonstrations against government policies, and that his detention is not an isolated act, but in part of a pattern of targeting him because of his identity and activism. The working group, the UN Working Group, has also found that the detention of other youth Iraq activists who were arrested in connection with the Iraq movement, such as Murad Zafzafi and Munir bin Abdullah, was arbitrary. Morocco has a long history of government repression, but its mishandling and its intransigence in the case of Iraq prisoners is unprecedented. I must confess that I tried very quietly in 2017 for active advice and a plan for a way out of the crisis, but never got any response. I'm sure I wasn't the only one. Many others have tried. 80 years have passed now. We need assertive action, not politicians in Morocco pressing the prisoners of conscience who have committed no crime to seek pardons from the king. This needs to stop. There is only one effective way to secure the release of all prisoners of conscience in Morocco. We need to redouble our effort nationally. We need to relaunch a new national campaign calling for their release. And we need redoubled support for these national efforts from all influential international capitals and from our partners in the international human rights movement. None of us should rest until all prisoners of conscience are released. Let me now make these remarks in Arabic for our Moroccan and Arabic audience, so I don't have to inflict the translation on Tahani.